The palace looked perfect that morning. Sunlight warmed the stone walls. Tourists snapped photos at the gates. Everything seemed normal, but Officer James Reed noticed something wrong. He stood at his post near the east wing, watching the royal family's private gardens. 23 years he'd served as a royal guard. 23 years of observing, protecting, staying silent. He knew when something was off. A small white paper bird sat on the windowsill. 3rd floor. Princess Charlotte's room. James felt his chest tighten. That window never opened. Security protocols forbade it. Yet there it was, a tiny origami crane, folded with careful hands, placed exactly where the morning light would hit it. He'd seen Charlotte make those birds before. During garden parties, she'd fold them for younger children, her small fingers working the paper with surprising skill. She was only 9 years old, but she carried herself with unusual awareness. Always watching. Always thinking. The bird sat there for exactly 4 minutes, before a gust of wind took it. James watched it tumble through the air, landing near his boots. He shouldn't pick it up. Protocol said ignore anything thrown from windows. Report it. Move on. But something made him look around first. The other guards faced different directions. Security cameras pointed elsewhere. He had maybe 10 seconds. James bent down, pretending to tie his boot. His fingers closed around the paper crane. It weighed almost nothing. But when he felt it, he knew. Something was inside. His heart hammered against his ribs. This could cost him everything. His career. His pension. His reputation. But if a 9-year-old princess was desperate enough to send a secret message, before you hear what happened next, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. This story gets intense, and you won't want to miss how it unfolds. James slipped the crane into his glove. He stood, resumed his position, kept his face blank. 2 hours until his shift ended. 2 hours to decide what to do. The morning dragged on. Tour groups passed. Dignitaries arrived for meetings. Everything normal on the surface. But James felt the paper bird pressing against his palm like a burning coal. He thought about Charlotte. Quiet girl. Polite. Always slightly apart from her siblings during public appearances. He'd noticed her watching the adults around her with careful eyes. Old eyes, his mother would have called them. Eyes that had seen things children shouldn't see. What could make a princess send a secret message? Finally, his replacement arrived. James walked to the changing room with steady steps. Inside his locker, alone at last, he carefully unfolded the crane. His hands trembled. The paper was from an old book. He could see fragments of printed text on it. But written in pencil and small, careful letters were 6 words. He hurts me when nobody's watching. James stopped breathing. Below that, smaller, almost too faint to read, please, I'm scared. The paper shook in his hands. No signature. No explanation. Just those words. He knew exactly who he was. Only one person had that kind of access. Someone trusted. Someone powerful. Someone who'd destroy anyone who accused him. James looked at his own reflection in the small mirror above the lockers. 51 years old, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes. He'd always followed orders, always stayed in his lane. But those words? He hurts me when nobody's watching. Thought about his own daughter. Grown now, with kids of her own. He thought about what he'd want someone to do. She'd ever written those words. James folded the paper carefully and put it in his inside pocket. Right against his heart, he had no proof. No witnesses. No authority to act, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't ignore this. Whatever it cost him, he was going to find out the truth. James went home that evening but couldn't eat. His wife, Margaret, noticed immediately. What's wrong? She asked, setting down her fork. He wanted to tell her. 30 years of marriage, and he'd never kept secrets. But this was different. This could put her in danger too. Long day, he said. The lie tasted bitter. She studied his face. She knew him too well. But she also knew his work sometimes carried weight he couldn't share. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That small gesture nearly broke him. After dinner, James went to his study. He pulled out the note and read it again. The pencil marks were light, like Charlotte had pressed gently, afraid someone might hear the scratch of graphite on paper. He hurts me when nobody's watching. Who could he tell? The royal family had layers of protection, handlers, staff, security chiefs. But if someone inside that circle was hurting Charlotte, they'd have power, connections, ways to silence people. James had seen it before. 23 years ago, a junior maid reported something inappropriate. She was gone within 48 hours. Paid off, they said. Given a nice settlement to keep quiet and disappear, he couldn't go through official channels. Not yet, but he knew someone who might help. The next morning, James called in a favor. His friend David worked palace security analysis, the people who review footage, check patterns, identify risks. They'd trained together decades ago. They met at a small cafe 3 blocks from the palace, far enough to feel safe, close enough not to seem suspicious. "You look terrible," David said, stirring his coffee. "I need to see security footage," James said quietly. East Wing, 3rd floor, Princess Charlotte's quarters. David's expression shifted. "That's restricted access." "You know that? I know. What's this about?" James pulled out his phone. He'd photographed the note. He showed David, angling the screen away from other customers. David's face went pale. "Jesus, James. I need to know if I'm crazy," James whispered. "I need to see who goes in that room. Who has access when the family's supposed to be alone?" David stared at the photo. His jaw worked. Finally, he nodded. "Give me 2 days. I'll need to be careful." Those 2 days felt like 2 years. James returned to his post. Watched the windows. Saw Charlotte once, briefly walking with her governess through the gardens. She looked small, fragile. She didn't look up. He wanted to run to her. Ask if she was okay. Tell her someone had found her message, but he couldn't risk it. Not yet. On the 3rd day, David called, "Meet me." Same place. 1 hour, James drove too fast. His hands gripped the wheel tight enough to hurt David. Was already there when he arrived. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles under his eyes. Coffee cup shaking slightly in his hands. "You were right to be worried," David said. James felt his stomach drop. David pulled out a small USB drive. "I copied what I could. This doesn't leave my sight, understand? If anyone knows I did this, I'm finished." "What did you find?" "Lord Edmund Ashworth," David said. The name hung between them like poison. The Queen's senior advisor. He has unrestricted access to the family's private quarters. Been with the family for 15 years. James knew the name. Everyone did. Lord Ashworth was untouchable. Decorated. Trusted. He'd advised 3 generations of royals. The footage, David continued, his voice dropping, shows him entering Charlotte's room. Multiple times. Always when she's alone. He stays between 8 and 15 minutes. When? Evenings, mostly. After official duties. When the family thinks the children are doing homework or reading. James felt rage building in his chest. Hot and sharp. "There's more," David said. "I checked the older archives. This has been happening for 8 months. Maybe longer. The patterns go back, but some footage is mysteriously corrupted. Corrupted. Deleted. Or tampered with. Someone with high-level access cleaned the servers." James clenched his fists under the table. "He's been covering his tracks." "Yes, and James." David leaned forward. "Lord Ashworth reviews security protocols. He knows where every camera is, where the blind spots are. He designed half the system. It's the perfect predator. Smart, powerful, protected. What do we do?" David asked. James looked at his friend. Saw the fear there. Saw the same moral struggle he felt? "We can't go to palace security," James said. "He'll know. He'll bury it." "The police? Who's going to believe 2 guards over a lord?" David rubbed his face. "So we do nothing? Let this continue." James thought about the note, about Charlotte's careful handwriting, about her tiny fingers folding that paper crane, risking everything to ask for help. "Oh," he said. "We find proof. Real proof. Something he can't deny or destroy." How? James didn't know yet, but he was going to figure it out, because somewhere in that palace, a 9-year-old girl was waiting, hoping someone heard her silent scream. James spent the next week planning. He watched Lord Ashworth from a distance, studied his patterns, his movements, his schedule. The Lord was careful, always professional in public, always proper. He smiled at children during events, spoke kindly to staff. The perfect gentleman. It made James sick. He noticed something else too. Charlotte changed when Lord Ashworth was near. Her small shoulders would tense. Her smile would become fixed, wooden. She'd position herself behind her siblings or her mother. Small movements, easy to miss if you weren't looking. But James was looking now. He couldn't approach Charlotte. Couldn't risk alerting anyone, but he needed to let her know someone was helping. On Thursday morning, during the changing of the guard ceremony, James took his position near the garden path. The royal children sometimes walked there with their tutors. He waited. At 10:15, Charlotte appeared with her governess, Miss Patricia. They were discussing history. Charlotte carried a notebook. As they passed, James did something he'd never done before. He stepped slightly out of position, just enough that Charlotte had to look at him. Their eyes met for half a second. James touched his chest, right where he'd kept her note. A tiny gesture. Charlotte's eyes widened. Just barely. Then she looked away and kept walking. But James saw it. Recognition. Understanding. Someone had found her message. That afternoon, David called again. "We have a problem." James stepped away from his post during break. "What?" Lord Ashworth requested a review of all security personnel. "Says it's routine." "But James, he's specifically asking about access logs. Who's been where? Who's requested footage?" James felt ice in his veins. He knows. Maybe. Or he's paranoid. Either way, we need to move faster. I'm working on it. "Work faster," David said, "because if he finds out we're onto him, that footage disappears. And probably us, along with it." James knew he was right. But how do you catch someone who controls all the security? Who knows every camera angle? Who has the power to destroy evidence? The answer came from an unexpected source. On Saturday, James was walking through the service corridors during his rounds. He heard crying, soft, muffled. He found one of the junior maids, Sarah, sitting on the floor near the linen closet. Tears streaked her face. "Miss Sarah." James knelt beside her. "What's wrong?" She looked up, startled. Then she saw his kind face, and something broke open. "I'm being transferred," she sobbed. "They're sending me to the country estate. Effective immediately." "Why?" She hesitated. Fear crossed her face. "I can't say." James thought about the maid from 23 years ago. "Did you see something? Something involving Lord Ashworth?" Sarah's face went white. "How did you please?" James said gently. "Tell me." She looked around, terrified, then whispered, "I was collecting laundry near Princess Charlotte's room. Lord Ashworth came out. He didn't see me, but I heard." Her voice cracked. "I heard Charlotte crying inside, and she was saying, 'Please stop.'" James felt his blood run cold. "When was this?" 3 days ago. I reported it to the head of household staff. They said I misheard, that I was mistaken. Then this morning I was told I'm being transferred. For my own good, they said. There it was. The pattern. Silence the witnesses. Move them. Pay them. Make them disappear. Sarah, James said carefully, would you be willing to write down what you heard? Sign it. Date it? They'll fire me. They're already moving you away. She wiped her eyes. Thought about it. The princess? Is she in danger? Yes. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay, I'll write it down. But James, what good is my word against a lord? Maybe none, James admitted. But it's a start. Sarah wrote her statement in the break room. Her handwriting shook, but her words were clear. She described the date, the time, exactly what she heard. She signed it and pressed her thumbprint beside her signature. What do I do now? She asked. Go to the country estate, James said. Stay safe. If anyone asks, you never spoke to me? She nodded and left. James now had two pieces of evidence. Charlotte's note. Sarah's statement. Still not enough. Not against someone like Lord Ashworth. He needed something undeniable. That night, James couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Margaret breathed softly beside him. An idea formed. Dangerous, possibly illegal. Definitely against protocol, but maybe the only way. He needed to record Lord Ashworth. Catch him in the act. Get evidence that couldn't be dismissed or destroyed. The next morning, James went to a small electronics shop across town. Paid cash, bought a tiny recording device, the kind that could fit in a pocket. Pick up audio from 15 feet away. If he could plant it in Charlotte's room before Lord Ashworth's next visit, but how? He had no access to the private quarters. No reason to be there unless he created one. James thought about the palace layout. The systems, the protocols. There was a way. Risky. Required perfect timing. But possible. He'd need to trigger a security check. Something minor. Something that would require guards to sweep the private wings. Standard procedure, he knew just how to do it. On Tuesday evening, James discreetly tampered with a motion sensor near the East Wing entrance. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make it go offline. 20 minutes later, alarms triggered. Protocol required a full security sweep of the affected wing. All rooms. All closets. Everything. James volunteered for the sweep team. His supervisor nodded. East Wing. 3rd and 4th floors. Standard check. James climbed the stairs with 2 other guards. They split up. Different floors. Different sections. He had maybe 4 minutes alone. Charlotte's room was at the end of the hallway. James knocked. No answered. He'd timed this perfectly. The family was at dinner. He pushed open the door. The room was exactly what you'd expect for a 9-year-old princess. Books, drawings, a small desk by the window. Everything neat and proper. James looked around quickly. Where could he hide the recording device? Somewhere Lord Ashworth wouldn't check. Somewhere that would pick up sound clearly. His eyes landed on the bookshelf. A small, decorative music box sat on the 3rd shelf. Old, ornate. Probably a gift. James opened it carefully. Empty inside, except for the small mechanism. He placed the recording device beneath the velvet lining, closed it, put it back exactly as it was. The device would record for 72 hours before the battery died. James left the room. Finished his sweep, reported back. All clear, he said. Now, he just had to wait. 3 days passed. Like 3 years. James worked his shifts. Smiled when expected. Spoke when spoken to. But inside, his mind raced constantly. What if the device didn't work? What if someone found it? What if Lord Ashworth didn't visit Charlotte during those 72 hours? What if he did? On the 3rd night, James lay awake again. Tomorrow, the device's battery would die. Tomorrow, he'd need to retrieve it. Somehow, his phone buzzed at 2:00 a.m. David's name flashed on the screen. James stepped into the bathroom, closed the door. What is it? Lord Ashworth requested private access to the East Wing tonight, David whispered. 40 minutes ago. Told security he needed to retrieve documents from his office there. But James what? His office is West Wing. He has no reason to be in the East Wing at 2 a.m. James felt his heart hammering. Is he there now? The logs show he entered at 1:47 a.m. He hasn't left yet. Charlotte's room, James moved without thinking. He threw on clothes, grabbed his keys. What are you doing? Margaret's sleepy voice came from the bedroom. Emergency at work. I'll explain later. He didn't wait for her response. James drove through empty streets. The palace loomed ahead, lit by security lights. He showed his badge at the gate. Night shift guards waved him through. Problem? One asked. Possible security breach. Checking it out. He parked and ran toward the East Wing entrance. Used his access card. The door clicked open. The hallways were dark except for emergency lighting. His footsteps echoed on marble floors, 3rd floor. He took the stairs 2 at a time. At the top, he paused, listened. Silence. He moved down the hallway toward Charlotte's room. The door was closed. No light showed underneath. James stood there. Every instinct screamed at him. Something was wrong. He couldn't burst in. Not without cause. Not without proof. Lord Ashworth would destroy him. Claim he was unstable, paranoid. James needed that recording. But he also needed to know Charlotte was safe. Right now. This moment. He made a decision. James knocked. Firm. Official. Security check. Please open the door. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened. Lord Ashworth stood there, perfectly dressed despite the hour. Calm, composed. His eyes met James's without a flicker of concern. Officer Reed, he said smoothly. Is there a problem? James looked past him. Charlotte sat on her bed. She wore pajamas. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. Routine sweep, sir, James said. We had an alert on this floor. I see. Well, as you can see, everything is fine. I was just checking on Princess Charlotte. She had a nightmare. Charlotte stared at the floor, said nothing. At 2 in the morning, sir? James asked. I was working late in my quarters below. I heard her cry out. I came to ensure she was well. Lord Ashworth's voice remained pleasant, reasonable. Surely you understand the concern we all have for the children's welfare. Every word was poison wrapped in courtesy. Of course, sir, James said. Your lordship protocol requires I verify the princess is unharmed. May I speak with her briefly? A flash of something crossed Lord Ashworth's face. Anger, quickly hidden. I assure you, protocol, sir. The 2 men stared at each other. A silent battle of wills. Finally, Lord Ashworth smiled. Of course, protocol must be followed. He stepped aside. James walked to Charlotte. Knelt down to her level. She wouldn't look at him. Princess Charlotte, he said gently. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Small. Mechanical. Did you have a nightmare? A pause. Then a tiny nod. Would you like me to fetch your mother or your governess? For the first time, Charlotte looked up. Her eyes met his. And in them, James saw everything. Terror, pleading, hope. No, she whispered. I'm fine. But her hands gripped her blanket so tightly her knuckles were white. James wanted to scoop her up. Run. Take her somewhere safe. But he couldn't. Not yet. If you need anything, he said carefully, anything at all, you can always ask any of the guards. We're here to protect you. Do you understand? Charlotte nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek. Lord Ashworth stepped forward. I believe the princess needs her rest, Officer Reed. James stood. He looked at Lord Ashworth. Saw the cold calculation behind those polite eyes. Of course, sir. James left the room. But he didn't leave the floor. He positioned himself at the end of the hallway, where he could see Charlotte's door. Lord Ashworth emerged 3 minutes later. He walked past James without a word. His expression was unreadable. James waited until he heard the stairwell door close. Then he waited another 10 minutes. Finally, he approached Charlotte's door again. Knocked softly. Princess. It's Officer Reed. I need to check one more thing. The door opened a crack. Charlotte's face appeared. More tears now. Are you really here to help me? She whispered. Yes, James said. I found your crane. Oh. Charlotte's breath caught. You did? I did. And I believe you. But I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that? She nodded. I need to get something from your room. The music box on your shelf? May I? Charlotte looked confused but stepped aside. James moved quickly, retrieved the music box, opened it. The recording device was still there. He pocketed it, looked at Charlotte. In a few days, this will be over. I promise. Until then, if he comes back, can you try to stay where others can see you? With your governess or your siblings? He'll find a way, Charlotte said. Her voice was hollow, old. He always does. James knelt down again. Not for much longer. You were very brave to send that message. You saved yourself. You just have to hold on a little more. Charlotte wiped her eyes. What if no one believes you? They will, James said. Though he wasn't sure, they will because you were brave enough to ask for help. He left before anyone else could see him. In his car, James pulled out the recording device. His hands shook as he plugged it into his laptop. The files loaded. 71 hours of audio. He scrolled through. Found tonight's timestamp. Pressed play. Lord Ashworth's voice came through. Smooth, kind at first. Now, Charlotte, you know, our special time is important. Why did you cry out? Charlotte's small voice. I don't want special time anymore. Don't be difficult. We've talked about this. You know what happens when you're difficult? Please. I'll be good. Just please, hush now. This is between us. You know that? If you tell anyone, they won't believe you. They'll think you're a liar. A bad princess. James stopped the recording. He couldn't listen anymore. He had it. Real proof? Undeniable. But now came the hardest part. Who could he trust with this? Who had the power to act? Who wouldn't be influenced or silenced? James sat in his car as dawn broke over the city. He had evidence. But evidence meant nothing if it reached the wrong hands. One wrong move, and Lord Ashworth would disappear this recording. And probably Charlotte along with it. James made copies. 3 USB drives. He gave one to David with instructions to hide it somewhere safe. One he buried in his garden at home. The third he kept on him at all times. If anything happens to me, he told David, you know what to do with that. David's face was grim. You really think it'll come to that? I hope not. But James knew the risk. Men like Lord Ashworth didn't operate without protection. Without contingency plans, without people willing to look the other way for the right price, James needed someone outside the palace system. Someone with authority who couldn't be influenced. He thought about it for 2 days, researched, made discreet calls to old contacts. Finally, he found her, Detective Inspector Helen Morrison. 20-year veteran of the London Metropolitan Police. Specialized in crimes against children. Known for being incorruptible. She'd taken down politicians, businessmen, even a minor royal cousin years ago for similar offenses. If anyone would listen, it would be her. James requested a meeting through official channels. Said he had information regarding a child welfare case. Sensitive nature. D. Morrison agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Camden. She arrived exactly on time. 50s sharp eyes. No nonsense demeanor. Officer Reed, she said, shaking his hand. You said you have information about a child at risk. James nodded, looked around. The cafe was nearly empty. He leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you could end my career. Maybe put me in danger. But a child is being hurt, and I need someone with the courage to act. D. Morrison's expression didn't change. I'm listening. James told her everything. Charlotte's note. The security footage patterns. Sarah's testimony. The recording with each detail. D. Morrison's jaw tightened. When he finished, she sat back. Silent for a long moment. You're talking about Lord Edmund Ashworth, she finally said. Senior advisor to the Queen. One of the most powerful men in Britain. Yes. And you have a recording of him with Princess Charlotte? Yes, let me hear it. James pulled out his phone. Headphones. He played 30 seconds. Just enough. D. Morrison's face hardened. That's enough. Shh. Come with me now. Where? My office. We're filing a formal complaint tonight before anyone knows what's happening. James felt a rush of relief and terror. What happens next? Next, I assemble a team I trust. We approach the palace with a warrant. We interview Charlotte with proper child welfare specialists present. We arrest Lord Ashworth. We'll fight back. He has connections. Let him fight, D. Morrison said coldly. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how men like him operate. They rely on silence, on fear, on people being too scared to act. She looked at James. You're not scared anymore, are you? I'm terrified, James admitted. But I can't let that child suffer another day. Good. That's the right kind of fear. The kind that makes you brave. They went to her office. D. Morrison made calls. Quiet, careful. She pulled in people she trusted. A child psychologist, a social worker, 2 other detectives with clean records. By midnight, they had a strategy. By 4 a.m., they had a warrant. By 6 a.m., they were at the palace gates. The head of palace security tried to stop them. This is highly irregular. You can't just. D. Morrison held up the warrant. This is signed by a high court judge. You can either cooperate or be charged with obstruction. Your choice. The palace erupted into controlled chaos. James led them through the corridors. To the east wing, to Charlotte's room, the queen herself appeared, regal, even in her dressing gown. What is the meaning of this? Your Majesty, D. Morrison said, respectfully but firmly, we have reason to believe Princess Charlotte is in immediate danger from a member of your household staff. The queen's face went pale. Charlotte? Who, Lord Edmund Ashworth? Silence. Absolute. Heavy. That's impossible, the queen said. But her voice wavered. We have evidence. We need to interview Princess Charlotte. With your Majesty's permission, but we will proceed regardless. The queen looked at James, recognized him. You're one of the guards, yes, your Majesty. You brought this accusation? James stood straight. Princess Charlotte asked for help. I'm helping her. Something passed across the queen's face. Understanding, perhaps even respect. Let them speak with her, she said quietly. Charlotte was brought to a secure room. The child psychologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, spoke with her gently, carefully. James watched through one-way glass. At first, Charlotte said nothing, just shook her head, scared. Charlotte, Dr. Chen said softly, you're safe now. No one will hurt you for telling the truth. Do you understand? Charlotte looked up. He said no one would believe me. I believe you, Dr. Chen said. Will you tell us what happened? And Charlotte did. In halting words, with tears, with shame that broke James's heart, she described months of abuse. The touches, the threats, the special time that wasn't special at all, how Lord Ashworth told her it was their secret, how he said she'd be sent away if she told, how he said her family would hate her. D. Morrison listened, her expression carved from stone. When Charlotte finished, Dr. Chen wrapped her in a blanket. You're so brave, so incredibly brave. In another room, officers were searching Lord Ashworth's quarters. They found more evidence. Letters he'd written, but never sent. Photos that should never have been taken. A pattern that went back years. He'd done this before. At other estates, other families, always protected by his position. By the systems that valued reputation over truth? Not anymore. At 9 a.m. Lord Edmund Ashworth was arrested as he tried to leave through a side gate. He demanded lawyers, threatened lawsuits, called in favors. D. Morrison looked him in the eye. You're done. The news broke by noon. Palace officials scrambled to control the narrative, but D. Morrison released a statement first. A child was harmed. A child asked for help. A brave officer listened. Justice will be served. James sat in a quiet room at the station, exhausted, shaking with adrenaline and relief. Margaret arrived. She'd heard the news. She found him and wrapped her arms around him. You could have been killed, she whispered. You could have lost everything. I know, James said, but she's safe now. That little girl is safe. Margaret pulled back, looked at her husband. I'm proud of you. Those words meant more than anything, but it wasn't over yet. Lord Ashworth had powerful friends. The trial would be brutal. They'd attack James's credibility, Charlotte's testimony, every piece of evidence. But Dee Morrison was ready. So was James. Because some things were worth fighting for, and a child's safety was. Everything the trial lasted 6 weeks, Lord. Ashworth's lawyers were exactly what James expected: expensive, ruthless. They attacked every angle. They questioned the recording's authenticity, called James's actions illegal search and seizure, painted him as an obsessed guard with delusions of heroism. They suggested Charlotte had misunderstood, that she was confused, that children often misinterpret adult affection. James sat through every day of testimony, watched them try to tear apart the truth. But Dee Morrison had built an airtight case. She presented the recording. Audio experts verified its authenticity. They testified it showed no signs of editing or manipulation. She presented Sarah's testimony. The maid described what she'd heard. The palace tried to discredit her, but she stood firm. She presented the security footage David had saved. Timestamps showing Lord Ashworth's visits. Patterns impossible to explain away. Most importantly, she presented Charlotte. The judge allowed her to testify via closed-circuit video. Dr. Chen sat beside her. Charlotte wore a simple blue dress. She looked tiny on the screen. Lord Ashworth's lead attorney, Mr. Pemberton, tried gentle questioning, tried to confuse her. Princess Charlotte, isn't it true that Lord Ashworth often helped with your studies? Yes, Charlotte said quietly. And he was kind to you. Charlotte hesitated. Sometimes? Sometimes. So he wasn't always unkind? He was kind when other people watched. Pemberton shifted tactics. You have a very active imagination, don't you? You enjoy reading fantasy books? Yes. Is it possible you imagined some of these events? Perhaps confused a dream with reality? Charlotte looked directly at the camera. At the courtroom beyond. Her voice was small, but clear. I know the difference between imagination and real, she said. I know what hurts. I know what scared feels like. I didn't imagine that. The courtroom went silent. Pemberton tried again. But surely he touched me, Charlotte said, louder now. He said it was our secret. He said no one would believe me. He said I was special. Her voice broke. I wasn't special. I was trapped. Dr. Chen put a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. The judge called for a recess. James watched grown men and women in that courtroom wipe their eyes. The prosecution also called other witnesses. 2 former staff members from Lord Ashworth's previous positions. Women who'd tried to report concerns years ago, who'd been silenced or dismissed. Their testimonies showed a pattern. Decades of predatory behavior, of using power and position to hurt children and silence anyone who noticed. On the final day, the prosecutor made her closing argument. Lord Ashworth relied on silence, on fear, on the systems that protect powerful men over vulnerable children. He counted on Princess Charlotte being too afraid to speak, too young to be believed. She paused. But one man listened. Officer James Reed. He risked his career, his safety, his reputation, because he understood one fundamental truth: protecting children matters more than protecting privilege. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. Lord Edmund Ashworth showed no emotion, but his hands trembled as they cuffed him. He was sentenced to 23 years. No possibility of parole. As they led him away, he looked at James, pure hatred in his eyes. James looked back steadily, unafraid. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. James didn't speak to them. D.I. Morrison handled the press. But Charlotte's mother, the Duchess, found James in a quiet hallway. "Officer Reed," she said. Her eyes were red. "I didn't know. I should have seen. I should have protected her." can protect her now, James said gently. By believing her. By helping her heal? Duchess nodded. She asked to see you. Would you? Would you be willing? James followed her to a private room. Charlotte sat there with Dr. Chen. When she saw James, she stood. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Charlotte ran to him, hugged him tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for listening. James knelt down. You saved yourself, Princess. You were brave enough to ask for help. That's all you. I just made sure people heard you. Will you keep being a guard? Charlotte asked. James smiled. Actually, I'm retiring. It's time. What will you do? I'm not sure yet. But I think maybe work with children who need help. Make sure they have someone listening. Charlotte smiled. A real smile. The first he'd seen from her. That's good, she said. 3 months later, James started working with a children's advocacy organization. He trained staff, taught people how to recognize signs of abuse, how to listen, how to act when children ask for help. Margaret joined him. Together, they built something meaningful from the hardest experience of their lives. Charlotte began intensive therapy. Slowly, she started healing. She'd have scars, emotional ones that might never fully fade. But she was safe. She was believed. She was supported. She wrote James a letter a year later. He kept it framed in his office. Dear Officer Reed, I'm doing better now. Dr. Chen says I'm brave. Mom says I'm strong. But I think I'm just learning to be a kid again. I still make paper cranes sometimes. But now they're just for fun. I don't have to hide anymore. Thank you for seeing me. Not Princess Charlotte. Just Charlotte. Just a girl who needed help. I'm going to be okay. Because of you. Your friend, Charlotte James, read that letter whenever he felt tired. Whenever the work seemed hard. Whenever he wondered if one person could really make a difference. Because he knew the answer. One person could change everything. One person who listened. One person who cared more about doing what's right than doing what's easy. On quiet mornings, James would walk through the city. Past the palace where he'd spent 23 years, he'd see the guards at their posts. Young men and women standing watch. And he'd hope they understood. Their job wasn't just to protect buildings or ceremonies. It was to protect people. Especially the smallest. Especially the most vulnerable. Especially the ones who folded paper cranes and threw them out windows, hoping anyone would hear their silent plea for help. James heard it. And Charlotte was free. Not because of power or position or protocol, but because one person chose to listen. And sometimes, that's all it takes to save a life. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that speaking up matters, hit that like button and share it. Because every child deserves someone who will listen. Every silent cry deserves to be heard. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply pay attention and act.